Hey everybody, this is JDGaming back today with a deck profile of my anti-Metalfoes deck, or stun Metalfoes, but I think anti-Metalfoes has a bit more of a nice ring to it. So this was, unsurprisingly, one of the most requested deck profiles for me to update for the new list since Electrumite went to 1, and honestly, spoiler alert, it makes no difference in this strategy. With Metalfoes, you're able to recycle it with Mithrilium. You can go ahead and play even 𝗖𝗍𝗡𝗘𝗧 and recycle it through that method. So you are going to be able to get 2 to 3 uses out of it in a single turn if that is what you want to do, so no issues there. But as a player of this strategy, I wanted to think, how can I keep this interesting for myself? How can I keep myself engaged in here? And I thought, well, going back to the origins of this deck, as a scale 1 and 8 pendulum deck, Apex Avian was a powerful boss monster that was played in Metalfoes. It was originally an archetype that was used as an engine for that type of a play, as opposed to, the fusion summons, because in the original set, Dark Illusion, we only had like Adamante, Auricalc, Crimsonite. It was pretty paltry in what we were able to do until we got Invasion Vengeance. So now we're kind of going back into those times, adding some other cute cards like our Morphage Sloth, since we have access to searching it with our Pendulum monster, and or rather our Link monster, excuse me, and just a bunch of tech choices that I think work nicely against most competitive metagames today. So this is going to be a let's build. As always, I'm going to go through my reasonings for things, and it's a little bit shorter than usual because although I'm going in as much depth as before, I did pre-record a huge introduction video to Metalfoes, so I'm not repeating myself in the first chunk of this video. So if you want to know how to play Metalfoes and you've never seen this deck before, go ahead and click the video link in the I card at the top, and it'll take you to that introduction, and then that video has its own timestamps and stuff, so you can, go around, jump to the parts that you need in order to get yourself caught up with how this deck works. Otherwise, at the end of this video, there is the alphabetical profile, as always, so you can go ahead and click the timestamps in the table of contents for this video's description, and that will take you to the various sections, including just the normal deck profile. If you're just here to steal the list or whatever, feel free to do whatever you want to do. But if you have any questions, feel free to check out the middle section of the video, where hopefully I've done a decent job explaining what this deck is trying to do. So without further ado, let's build anti-Metalfoes. The first step in any deck profile is to establish the theme and to build the core, but as I mentioned here, I do have a video that I'm linking here at the top of the corner of the screen here. Basically, that goes ahead and takes you to my Metalfoes introduction video, where all of this stuff is explained in detail. But I, at least for this profile, wanted to go through the numbers on things, so it'll be a quick Spark Notes version of that deck. But if you don't know how to play Metalfoes, do check that out. Essentially, we're playing 3 copies of Gold Driver, because he's a Metalfoe, 3 copies of Silver, because she's a Metalfoe, 3 Steelin, because he's a Metalfoe, and 3 Volflame, because he's a Metalfoe, much like Billy Break in his original awesome winning deck profile. And we're also playing 3 copies of 𝗪𝗼𝗍, because I've mentioned this a lot, but it's worth mentioning here too, I think. With the change to the Link summoning rules and the fact that you can't pend 5, you're not missing out by not being able to pendulum summon the level 1 𝗪𝗼𝗍. And so just getting the bonus effect is quite nice. 3 more copies just adds consistency of doing the exact same thing, so I like playing 3 of each of these for 15. Then from here, I play 1 of each of Metalfoes Fusion, Full Metalfoes Fusion, Combination, and Counter. Just 1 of each of these, because 4 dead draws potentially aren't, the best thing to play, but they're so searchable. You have the full range of options by playing all of them, and they're all powerful, as I discuss in detail. And of course, the whole point of this strategy is to go and fusion summon, so we'll talk about those in just a second. But before that, in the core, and I do consider this part of the core, are 2 Painful Decision. This thing basically lets you go and get whatever scale you need in order to complete your 1 and 8, and so it's extremely powerful. Mathematically speaking, your chance of double drawing this is either 5% if you play 3 copies of this and you're going second for the full 6 cards, or a minuscule 1.9%, not even 2% if you play 2 of these things. So don't even make the argument that, oh, I don't want to play 2 of them because I might double draw them. Mathematically, it's going to happen 2 in 100 games, 1 in every 50. Like, get over it. It's not going to happen that much. Whereas the chance of you drawing into 1 of these things and fixing your hand is much higher and much more relevant. So that's why we play 2 copies of this. Then the fusions, 1 Alcahest. This is like your pseudo trap thanks to your full Metalfoes fusion. You could go ahead and turn it into a Metalfoes Adamante in order to do some more damage using him and the monster that you equipped with him. So that's the whole point of playing 1 of each of these. Then we play a full 3 copies of Mithrilium, because essentially this thing has a powerful bouncing effect that can be used offensively or can be used as part of your own combos because it lets you go and do that, lets you recycle your own stuff, so that's where one of your extra Metalfoes Electrumites comes in. And on top of that, every time she's sent to the graveyard, she floats into a new monster. That's not once per turn, so you can go Mithrilium into Mithrilium and potentially do that again into another Mithrilium, or as we'll see here, we're actually going to use her as link material as well in this strategy in conjunction with the Electrumite to go for some nutty summon sorceress plays. So very powerful. I like the 3 of, that way even if you get one striked or ogred, you still have the second and third copy to then recycle the other parts, so you'll never run out. Then we do play the 1 Orichalc. This thing, of course, is a Scapegoat Destroyer. Don't forget that. It's basically Chaos Max Dragon, but it's easily accessible off of your deck's core plays, and you do have the ability to destroy cards if it's sent to the grave for any reason, including your own proactive plays. So don't forget about that. And then the next chunk of the deck is basically revolving around this guy. You know, this guy doesn't need too much of an introduction here, but essentially has 3 effects, which lets you go search a card to your extra deck and then add the card from your extra deck to your hand, and in the process draw a card if you killed your scale for the Metalfoes-esque effect. And the best way to bring it out, of course, is to use 3 copies of Rescue Hamster and 3 copies of Rescue Rabbit. Essentially 2 Pendulum monsters for free into this, which is awesome, and then Hamster has additional abilities to recycle your cards once per duel, and that gives you potentially 4 cards instead of just 2. So very powerful engine. I would not take them out. I was originally cutting them down when I was trying to fit in more stun cards, anti-meta cards, and I found, why is this deck not working as well? Oh, it's because I don't have 1 card options to go into Electrumite. Well, you have 6 options, so you'll be able to go and make that play without too much of a problem. And then the last card I play 3 of in the kind of tech core spot here is 3 copies of Archfiend Eccentric. I love this card. Actually, one of my subs asked me recently, can I replace this with like a different card? And my answer is, I would strongly encourage you not to, because if you understand like what it is you're trying to do with this card, it does 2 things, right? First of all, it has a once per turn effect, hard once per turn on each of its abilities. You can go and kill a spell or trap if it's scaled, including your own, or you can kill a monster, including your own. And the cool thing with that is you're able to go ahead, activate this, pop your own combination for a free Rhoda-like search effect off of that card, completing your scale, and then you can pendulum this guy back and pop another card. So this 1 card gives you 2, and it's very powerful. Combos with your own cards, clears your opponent's floodgates, yada yada. It's a very powerful card, so I do like playing it at 3. And you can always just fuse it into Mithrilium or link it off into Electrumite. So then for this next section of the deck, you have to understand that your key goal in the beginning is to go ahead, at least with the Metalfoes portion of this, to go ahead and link summon your Heavymetalfoes Electrumite, which then lets you go and potentially pendulum summon or whatever, lets you get the resources to fusion summon into a Metalfoes Mithrilium. And with this combination right here, you're able to go and say, hey, 1 monster plus a link 2 monster, they're both psychics, that's the same type. I can go ahead and send the 2 to the graveyard to summon Sorceress, and this card is of course nuts for being able to tutor out another card of the same type as the monster it's pointing to, and that's really neat because don't forget, you just sent this card to the graveyard from the field. That means the floating effect triggers, allowing you to grab either from your graveyard or face up in your extra deck one of your monsters you had just used. So suppose I used a Volflame anywhere in that combo sequence. Maybe I fused it for Mithrilium, maybe I went and popped it in order to search my fusion spell. Whatever the case may be, I can go ahead and float right into this guy, and then that will let me go ahead and summon out another copy of this from my deck. With 2 level 7 monsters, I could go ahead and, turn these into another Electrumite if I'm able to recycle it in between the play sequence, or I could go ahead and stack the 2 of them, allowing me to go for Odd Eyes Absolute Dragon. This guy has 2800 attack and the ability to negate an attack, but honestly, you're not using it for that effect. What you're going to do is either link these 2 off, or you're going to go ahead and pop this guy using a Metalfoes effect, and when Odd Eyes has been sent to the graveyard, you're able to replace him with an Odd Eyes Vortex Dragon. This thing has 2500 attack, which is not a slouch, 3000 defense, which is quite strong, especially if you're going first, and upon summon lets you spin back one of your opponent's cards, which is really neat because it lets you proactively get rid of threats your opponent may have already established if you're going second. On top of that, let's say you don't need that. Why would I go ahead and summon this turn 1? Well, its other ability is it lets you take one of your face-up extra deck monsters, and then you just spin it back into your deck in order to negate the activation and effect of a card. So basically, you have a Cyber Dragon Infinity type of monster built into your deck's core play thanks to Summon Sorceress. So that's part of the reason why we're playing this Summon Sorceress now, is because you're able to go ahead and basically leverage your really simple and bread and butter combo of Mithrilium and Electrumite into, a Link 3 that then gives you materials to play right into Summon Sorceress's effect. And the variations of this effect are awesome as well. For example, let's say I went and played 𝗪𝗓𝗓 as one of my cards, again for the scale effect, or maybe I went and I fused it away. I can bring one of these guys out, bring out a second copy, and then stack the two of these for any variety of Link 4s. 𝗪𝗓𝗡, of course, is getting a lot of hype right now because it's back for a while, but I don't know how useful it is right now, not only because there are a lot of ways to play around it, but because you're getting rid of your own scales and potential OTK board, so I feel like it sets you back a little too much. But what you can strengthen your board with are cards like Abyss Dweller, which lets you shut your opponent out of their entire graveyard for a turn or two. That can be devastating when you have, again, potential access to cards like the 𝗖𝗓𝗡𝗖𝗧 for stealing your opponent's cards during their turn. Maybe you're able to go Vortex Dragon on top of this, because this combo doesn't have to bring out the Dweller. You could bring out Dweller anytime you're able to bring out Gold Drivers, maybe through Pendulum Summon or something. I also like playing a copy of Cairn Gorgon, the Anti-Luminescent Knight, because this thing lets you direct any targeting effect to another correct target, whether it's your opponent's card or not. As long as it's an appropriate target, you get to choose everything. And that's really powerful in protecting your board from simple removal tricks, and it protects your scales from removal tricks as well. Very well-rounded card. 2450 is a solid attack stat, and I feel like it does enhance the boards you're able to put up versus Castel. I mean, it's able to kick stuff back to the deck, but why wouldn't you just play like Nightmare Unicorn? Or I'm not even playing that because Mithrilium lets you go and bounce stuff away. It is a simple form of removal. Not nearly as permanent, of course, but since you had dead end with the Xyz, I felt I want to put something as kind of a cherry on top to my field and make it better, and these were the rank 4s that I felt made the most impact. But 𝗪𝗧𝗑 is not bad, but you're able to win easily off of this setup that I felt, these guys would be better. And similar case with like 𝗖𝗍𝗄𝗏 the Lightning, you have so much removal power in this strategy that I didn't feel the necessity of playing this. And then the last two guys you could stack together in this particular deck, because I'm not playing any Link 2s, or rather rank 2s, excuse me, would be 2 copies of Silvered, which lets you go for a rank 3 play. And so I like to go for the spicy number 75 Bamboozling Gossip Shadow. This guy is a 2600 defender here, spellcaster rank 3. Not a lot of people know about him. I know he's been popping up in some events, but he's still kind of a rogue pick here. Needs 2 or more level 3 monsters. Realistically, you're only using 2 in this deck. Once per turn, when an opponent's monster activates its effect, as a quick effect, you could attach 2 materials from this card to have the activated effect become both players draw 1 card. So yeah, your opponent didn't necessarily lose anything. They just 1-for-1 into a free draw, but you're able to take your opponent's best monster effect that they need for their combos or to break your board and turn it into, oh, we each draw. So you get one card out of the process. If you're summoning this card for free off of this play sequence, or a pendulum summon, or a rescue monster, this is absolutely awesome because you're getting the card for free as well. And just the sheer control you have on a 26 defender, has the ability to negate one of your opponent's monster effects, essentially, is very solid, and it's easily accessible because you have not only Silvers, but Archfiend Eccentrics as level 3 monsters to summon this card as well. And then it does have another ability that lets you play other normal monsters and turn them and their materials into cards for this, but realistically, if you just get the 2 guys under this and summon this, it's probably doing its job. You don't really need to get greedy and constantly stack more monsters. But then on top of that, I do personally like having some method of getting rid of the Summon Sorceress, because remember, it needs both of its zones here. Even if you consolidate here, I wanted something that you could turn, into that. And so let's say you went for the Odd Eyes Vortex Dragon play in order to, summon this. You could go ahead and summon the Absolute Dragon and then turn the 2 of these effect monsters into Underclock Taker. I like Underclock Taker because it has a lot of flexibility, because now from here, let's say I went and summoned Vortex Dragon, I could spin away one of my opponent's cards, have the potential to negate another card, and now I can use Underclock Taker's ability to reduce one of my opponent's guys by 2500, allowing me to basically blank a Link monster and kill them through that. So I do like the flexibility there. And then the fact that these arrows work together in order to, give you all 3 zones means you can use Summon Sorceress to maybe summon something here, and then you could go and special summon something here, and then just turn these 2 into, the Underclock Taker, and then you could potentially summon into another zone here. So I felt this is a pretty interesting card in that it always gives you zones. You could do the same thing as if you summon Sorceress up here, and then summon your Underclock Taker here, because now you could summon to the left of Underclock Taker, and then you could just use the Metalfoe effect, pop the summon Sorceress, and your extra monster zone is free to use as well. So Underclock Taker is just kind of interesting as a flexible means of not only triggering your odd eyes, but also giving you more OTK power and opening up some more zones in a fun way. And then that's pretty much it for that combo sequence. Now, this is where the anti-meta stuff really comes in. Obviously, having the 𝗖𝗍𝗓, having the Vortex Dragon as part of your plays, and some of these Xyz monsters, it really helps stun your opponent. But I wanted something main decked, something really flavorful that we could throw into the deck's core here, or tech it out at least in a way that it feels like it's truly anti-Metalfoes and not just extra deck shenanigans. So one copy of Amorphic Sloth. So this guy's a level 6 Earth monster, scale 3, so you actually could use this guy with a high level guy, or high scale guy rather, to scale and pendulum summon out your guys, so your rescue monsters and some of the other guys we'll talk about, because 3 and 6, or excuse me, 3 and 7, 3 and 8, that lets you go for most of your guys. 2250 attack is okay, defense is 0, but its scale effect doesn't matter to us. We're not using it for that. What we're using it for is, if it's on the field, neither player can special summon monsters from the extra deck except Amorphage monsters while this guy is a monster. So this is basically like a Vanity's Fiend, and the cool thing is, you're able to go ahead, pop this guy when you don't want it using a Metalfoes effect, and then pendulum him right back. So this card is basically like Vanity's Emptiness back in the day, kind of like how you'd Mithrilium that card back to your hand, turn it off, special summon, set it again for your opponent's turn to make it one-sided. This card does that. And the reason we're finally playing one is because Heavymetalfoes Electrumite can search this as our pendulum monster to basically shut our opponent out of their game for the turn, and then now it's our turn again. Hey, now I can attack even if I went first because a turn's gone around. I can now get rid of this guy, special summon a bunch, and then just push for game when my opponent has been hindered for the entire turn. So this is the main stun card. I was originally playing around with like Fossil Dyna and stuff for anti-special summon. It was okay, but it felt like sometimes it's too little too late. This thing is so searchable and fast that it ends up becoming much more viable, and I like the fact that you can turn it off and turn it back on, unlike Fossil Dyna. So this card is a solid one of. And then I like playing the 3 copies of Mist Valley Apex Avian. This is a level 7, which means you can't scale it, or you can't scale an Archfiend Eccentric to summon this guy, because levels can't be on the scales, they have to be within the scales. But 1 and 8 easily able to summon this guy, and you do have Bismugears and stuff for extra 8s in order to bring it out. 27 body winged beast monster, once per chain. When a card or effect is activated as a quick effect, you could target a Mist Valley card, including itself, and then return that to the hand to negate the activation of the card and destroy that card. And this is really cool because this feels like a pendulum monster. It's very reminiscent of the old days of Metalfoes again, where basically you negate a card, it goes back to your hand, and next turn you pendulum it right back, and it's just this recurring threat, much like pendulums. The whole concept of pendulums, if you think about it, is that it's the inevitable return. It's like a pendulum swinging back and forth. It swings one way and it will come back, and these cards fit that theme. So I really like the Mist Valley Apex Avian in that if you go first, obviously it's going to blow out your opponent, but even if you go second, it just becomes a huge body with a built-in negation effect that's able to fight through a lot of stuff, and then you could keep bringing it back. So definitely a 3 of, and it was by happenstance I found this guy because it was reprinted in Shining Victory, so easy to obtain super rare now. No excuse for anyone who wants to get this on a budget. And then on top of that, I like playing 3 copies of the Thunder King Ryo, Stun Master himself. This guy is useful for all of his traits. Level 4 is very easy to summon, even if you're using janky scales like your Sloth or your Eccentric. Level 4 fits right into all of your scales there. Even if you're using like a scale 3 Sloth with a scale 5 Rescue Hamster, you could still summon this guy out, which is pretty funny. Basically, neither player is able to search cards from their deck. They have to draw them in order to add them from deck to hand. And that's awesome because you're able to stop everything you pretty much would with Ash using this card. But you don't care about this. Your Metalfoes searches are straight to the field. Your Electrumite goes and puts it into your extra deck. You're not touched by this except for combination, which it's 1 card, and you can easily summon this after you've resolved that search effect. So Thunder King is absolutely nuts. Worst case scenario, you link it off or pop it with your own effect, and its effect's turned off, but it's just so oppressive on your opponent. 1900 bodies able to do a lot of damage or kill some sizable monsters as well. And don't forget, it's able to absorb the summon of a monster that's a special summon, so Link Summon, Synchro Summon, Xyz Summon, etc., it's able to take those apart as well, so it becomes a very powerful stun monster to supplement your board. Imagine drawing either an Apex Avian or a Thunder King Ryo when you're able to very easily summon out one of your controlling extra deck Xyz monsters or your Vortex Dragon, and you probably have access to a full Metalfoes fusion in order to go your 𝗖𝗍𝗓 and steal one of their monsters as well. This is how this deck works. It is a bunch of stun monsters. You could play duplicates and triplicates of any of these you happen to draw, and they just put so much pressure on your opponent without sacrificing the consistency of Metalfoes, because you have the rescue monsters and 15 guys that literally do the exact same thing. So this is where anti-Metalfoes comes into play, guys. And then for the last few cards here, I just want to mention some tech to finish out both decks. So we do play 2 copies of Pot of Desires, because once you do all your searching, you honestly don't care what cards you have. You're just going to pendulum everything and make a big board and win. And you're just going to stun your opponent turn 1 for a bit using Sloth until then. So Desires basically is a safe card in this, because you're able to go for your fusions, make sure they're not vulnerable, draw 2 cards for free. You don't care what's banished, and you're just going to use those resources to leverage into game in scenarios where you couldn't. So very powerful card. I've never been disappointed by playing it. Just don't be dumb and activate it turn 1 before you've done anything. Like, do your searches and then activate this card, and you'll be fine. Then we have Solemn Judgment as our 40th card. I think this is better than playing like an Upstart Goblin or something in this deck, because Solemn Judgment, whereas it may not be a monster that has the ability to, win the game, you have so many options for that on a consistent basis. It's basically, if you happen to draw Judgment, fine, throw it behind the rest of your setup as an extra card that you have to negate your opponent's card. And even if this card may make you wait a little bit in order to get value out of it, you're going to get value out of it the next turn when you squash your opponent's attempts at breaking your board, and then you just end them the next turn. So that's why Judgment's in here. That rounds the main deck out to 40, and then I do have 𝗖𝗍𝗍𝗓 here in the extra deck as well. This guy's really cool because he's a fire monster that needs 2 fire monsters, and every one of your guys in your main deck is fire, so that's really cool, or at least all your Metalfoes are. Beast doesn't matter, doesn't hurt though. 1400 attack, link 2. Of course, just like the other attribute guys, he powers up all your fire guys, including himself, by 500 attack and defense, and all your water guys, or all the water guys on the field, including your opponent's guys, will be reduced by 400 attack and defense. So that's already pretty decent, because when you have like 4 monsters, let's say, on the field, very common in a situation where you're fusion summoning, link summoning, pendulum summoning multiple guys, very, very reasonable scenario. You're able to get 2,000 free attack points on those 4 monsters between, 500 times 4. And that's ridiculous, because that's an additional free monster. It puts so much damage into play because you're able to spam out monsters that 𝗖𝗍𝗍𝗓 actually helps you push for game in situations where you may need the little extra damage. So it does become relevant because you're getting so many creatures into play. And then its other ability, of course, is to recycle a fire monster when it dies by battle or card effect, and you can even trigger it with your own Metalfoes monster and recycle itself, recycle Electrumite for the 3rd time now, or so you could use it the 3rd time rather. Or you could go ahead and add a Metalfoes monster and just scale whatever you need to, use it as fusion material, whatever the situation may be. 𝗖𝗍𝗍𝗓 fits perfectly in this deck, and it's never a slouch despite its appearance and its design. You are actually able to put this into play proactively for either an OTK or for a combo that lets you extend with another copy of Electrumite or another scale. So this is the last card in here. I'm very surprised by, what it was able to do. Honestly, I was playing 2 copies of Heavymetalfoes Electrumite originally because it was so searchable and recyclable, or rather playable and then recyclable in the previous iterations of Metalfoes. Now that it's down to 1, just replace the Heavymetalfoes Electrumite you lost with a copy of 𝗖𝗍𝗍𝗓, and then honestly you didn't really need the 3rd copy of that card in this deck anyway, so this card fits quite nicely as a sub. If you watched the video in its entirety, thanks! Hopefully you guys enjoyed seeing the creation of this deck and all the little nuances you're able to do with anti-Metalfoes, as well as I did putting it all together. So we're going to go ahead and talk about the main here. It's not truly alphabetical, but I feel like this makes the most sense if you want to try this deck out for yourself. So we're playing 3 of each of the Metalfoes: Gold Driver, Silvered, Steelin, Volflame, and rare Metalfoes 𝗍𝗍𝗓 as well. Then we play 1 of each of the spells and traps, so 1 Metalfoes Fusion, 1 full Metalfoes Fusion, 1 Metalfoes Combination, and a counter. And then for Pendulum monsters first, we have Amorphage Sloth at 1, and then triple Archfiend Eccentric, triple Rescue Hamster, and going into effect monsters, triple Rescue Rabbit, because that gives you a lot of free summoning power for your Electrumite. Then we got triple Mist Valley Apex Avian, triple Thunder King Ryo, double Painful Decision and Pot of Desires for our spells, and then a Lone Solemn Judgment for our 40th card in the main deck. Then going off into our extra deck here, starting again with Metalfoes cards first, we have one copy of Heavymetalfoes Electrumite, then we have the full Metalfoes 𝗖𝗢𝗡𝗘 and 𝗓𝗏𝗍 at 1 as well, triple Metalfoes Mithrilium, and then a single copy of Orichalc. I don't play Crimson Knight because although realistically you could be like, what if you steal a big monster and there's like a metagame for that? Well, realistically 3 monsters for 1 is pretty difficult to do because 𝗖𝗢𝗡𝗃 can only steal 1 at a time. So that's that. Then we got Dual Little Chimera and Underclock Taker as some generic Link 2s that fit with this theme. We got Summon Sorceress at Link 3, and then we got for Xyz monsters number 75, Bamboozling Gossip Shadow at rank 3. Got rank 4s in Abyss Dweller and Cairn Gorgon, the Anti-Luminescent Knight. And then we got Odd Eyes Absolute Dragon at level 7 or rank 7, so you can go ahead and pop it and turn it into your Odd Eyes Vortex Dragon for your 15th card in your extra deck. That's the end of this video, but there's plenty more where it came from. I invite you to explore the playlists on screen to see what else I have to offer, and if you really liked what you saw today, consider subscribing to JDGaming for more Yu-Gi-Oh videos. Thanks guys, this is JDGaming, hope you guys enjoyed as always, and I'll see you guys next time.